Are you crazy to bring a child to work? This is not a daycare or a shelter for the gray and poor. Solve your own problems, not at our expense. Nastya listened to this tirade and didn't have a chance to say a word. She suspected that bringing her son to work wouldn't please her partner. Sorry, Nastya mumbled when Vika calmed down a bit and fell silent. You know I have no one to leave Andryushka with now. Tatiana Petrovna is sick, and I can't take him to daycare with our schedule. I had no other choice but to bring him here. Vika gave the little boy such a cold look that he immediately cowered and hid behind his mother. He's not sick, and he won't bother you. You won't even notice him, really. Andryushka nodded, looking so scared that Nastya felt sorry for leaving him with her angry partner. She had to tidy up the rooms on the second floor, but she couldn't bring her son there. She couldn't risk the homeowner noticing an uninvited guest and firing her. Nastya sat her son by the window on the table where the cook Lydia usually cut salads. She gave him an album for drawing, colored pencils, and smiled. Be a good boy, don't make noise, and don't disturb Vika while she works. I'll be back soon. Draw our cat Vagia for me. Okay, the boy whispered. Good job, Nastya said. In the absence of his mother, the boy wouldn't move or make a sound to avoid angering his angry aunt. Nastya looked at Vika, who scrubbed the sink with such force as if she wanted to scrub it to holes. Nastya waved goodbye to her son and went to work with unprecedented zeal. She vacuumed the homeowner Sergei Dmitrievich's room first, as she always did, because she found it creepy. The burgundy wallpaper made the room seem tight and stuffy, and the heavy curtains didn't let in any sunlight. Passing by the photos on the table, Nastya looked away from the people depicted in them. They had long been dead, Sergei Dmitrievich's wife and children. Nastya absent-mindedly brushed the dust off of them and hurried to leave. Sometimes she felt like the owner of the house blamed her for their deaths, and if you thought about it, they were right. Nastya finished cleaning Sergei Dmitrievich's room, then his son's, and tiptoed past the home office. The homeowner was working on the second floor. She could finish there and check on Andryushka and Vika at the same time. The girl's fears were confirmed when she heard her partner's screams, barely descending the stairs. He was too clumsy to be left alone for a second. Why did you climb up there? Nastya quickened her pace and almost ran into the kitchen, just in time. Vika was looming over the boy like a furious fury, and from the expression on Andryushka's face, it was clear that he was about to burst into tears. What happened? Nastya asked, running to her son and shielding him from her partner. Vika gave her an angry look. Don't you see? He broke a glass. I just stepped out of the kitchen for a moment to answer the phone. How did your little brat climb up there? I told him to sit in the corner and not stick his nose where it doesn't belong. Nastya looked at the boy questioningly. He whispered, I wanted a drink. Do you see? Nastya turned to her partner and said quietly, Andryushka just wanted a drink of water. He didn't do anything wrong. Vika nearly choked with anger. What do you mean, he didn't do anything wrong? The glass is broken. Do you think the owner won't notice? Who will be responsible? Sergei Dmitrievich won't count the glasses. You know that perfectly well. Quiet, Nastya said, and then there were more guests in the house than ever before. No one will catch them. And if they find out, you can blame me. Say that I broke it, and I'll go and tell everyone right now. Well, Vika, it seems like you're taking on too much. From what I see, you bring a child here as if it were a private daycare. He breaks dishes, and it's as if it's normal for you. Remember, Vika, you're not the boss here. Vika tore off her apron, raised her head proudly, and left the kitchen. Apparently, she was going to carry out her threat. Nastya looked sadly at her son. Andryushka, we got caught. We didn't play the game for long. Forgive me, Mom. The boy muttered. Nastya patted him on the head. It's okay. It happens to everyone. Not everyone gets such a nasty teacher. So, my hero, hold on with her. Not everyone can handle a whole hour. Now sit here quietly, like a little mouse. Good. I want to see where she went, as I feared. Nastya and Vika went straight to the owner's office, where the man was sorting through some work documents. Sergei Dmitrievich, Vika's voice instantly changed and became as sweet as it always was when she addressed her boss. Come in, the man said dryly. Nastya waited until her partner disappeared into the office and approached the door. She understood perfectly well that eavesdropping was not good, but she couldn't help herself. Two fates were at stake, hers and her son's. Sergei Dmitrievich, I need to talk to you about something important. You understand, it has become impossible to work in this house. Why? Am I making too much of a mess, or has Alexander done something to displease you? No, Vika quickly exclaimed. You have nothing to do with this. You still have to look for that perfect boss. I'm telling you, it's a blessing. What else? Nastya sighed with relief. But how long would this go on? In Sergei Dmitrievich's house, the girl felt like she was on a minefield. Everything here was a danger to her, and how did Nastya get into this situation? Just a few years ago, everything was going smoothly. The girl came to the city from the village to enter college. Her elderly mother, Vera Alexandrovna, still lived in their hometown of Avdiivka. Nastya was born late, when her mother was over 40 and raised her alone. She worked hard and aged prematurely, with a bouquet of illnesses and joint problems that made it difficult for her to move around. The garden was half neglected, and Nastya couldn't handle it all. So she didn't want to leave her mother alone in case she needed help. Mom, I'm not going anywhere, she said after receiving her diploma. I haven't seen any tall buildings, industrial chimneys, or traffic jams in the city. I'll stay here with you. Vera looked at her daughter incredulously. Have you lost your mind? What are you going to do here? You need to work. Nastya waved her hand carelessly. I'll work here. For example, I could work as a mail carrier and deliver newspapers, romance, and fresh air to the post office. There's no romance here, her mother explained. You'll have to walk through the cold and mud on the streets. Everything turns into a swamp after the first rain. And how long will you carry the mail when the village is dying? The farm closed down, the poultry farm is barely surviving. Everyone will leave, and only 5 houses with old people will remain. You won't be needed with your mail. Remember my words. Mama, you're a pessimist, Nastya sighed. What do you suggest I do? Abandon you here like a traitor and go somewhere unknown in the city? It's not that far away. It's only an hour's drive. I'm not that old that I need someone to look after me. You'll study in the city and come visit me on holidays if you want to. But you seem upset, as if we're parting forever. Where are your persuasions? Where's your cunning? Her mother forced her daughter to go to the city. Nastya did well in school and was considered one of the best graduates. Staying in the village with her abilities was simply foolish. Vera Alexandrovna believed that her daughter was born for something greater than just existing in the countryside, and she tirelessly persuaded her to change her mind. Nastya agreed with her mother's arguments and applied to college. She reasoned that she could always work at the post office. Besides, her best friend Katya also repeated her mother's persuasion. "What can you do here?" the girl said disapprovingly. "There are only old people left in the village. They even closed the cultural center, and there's no library because there's no one to work there. Where will you find a husband here? Will you marry old Trofim and sit with him on the porch?" Nastya just laughed. "What grooms, Katya? What are you talking about? I'm thinking about who to study with here. And you're already matchmaking for me. It's not the time for that now. No, it's serious for a young girl to have something to do. And where else but in college will you have the most choices of guys? You won't find them in school or at work. You have to seize the moment," Katya said. Nastya couldn't say that these talks about guys inspired her. There were no princes or knights in the village school where she studied. And Nastya herself was a modest girl who didn't wear bright makeup, and there were no suitors around her. The only one who showed her any attention was Slavik Fedorov, a shy honor student who was always immersed in books. As Katya laughed at him while discussing higher matters, she asked her friend, "What did you see in him?" "He's not a guy, he's a walking encyclopedia. You don't have to go to the registry office or to the show what we're when with him, you can die of boredom." Nastya shrugged and replied, "I'm not planning on marrying him. We're just friends." "Well, be careful," Katya warned. "I heard that Slavka calls you his girlfriend when he talks to other guys. It seems like things are getting serious between you two." This news was particularly unpleasant for Nastya, who couldn't stand gossip behind her back. However, Slavik continued to behave as usual, only discussing space and his plans to become an academic with Nastya. Gradually, she calmed down and continued to talk to him as an old friend, without seeking any other relationships. Her main goal was not to disappoint her mother, Vera Alexandrovna, who had hoped that Nastya would study economics and eventually return to their village to replace their old accountant, Galina Petrovna. Katya was always by her side, even sharing a room in the dormitory, which seemed like a real miracle to the girls. Slavik, on the other hand, enrolled in biology and lived in a different dormitory, much to Katya's relief. "He's neither fish nor fowl," she grumbled. "You should just reject him. This slimeball won't lead you to anything good." "It's awkward," Nastya muttered. "I've known him since childhood. We grew up on the same street. And now that we're grown up, it's time to disappear. He should find himself a girl with glasses and talk to her about higher matters, like an old man who doesn't know how to have fun," Katya concluded. She was right. Slavik was completely immersed in his studies and didn't participate in any student events. He scornfully referred to those who went to parties as party animals, saying that he'd rather be the best student, write more papers, and participate in academic activities. "In competitions, teachers will notice me and then doctoral students won't be far away, correctly." Nastya muttered something vague in response. She didn't drink alcohol and only went to parties with her friend for company. But she wasn't ready to study tirelessly, sometimes after a hard day of preparation, with numerous written works when Nastya's head was spinning from calculations. She just needed to relax a bit, forget for a while that she was a diligent student and feel like a young girl. Katya helped her diligently with this. "Tomorrow is Miranov's birthday," she said. "Somehow on Saturday, she's celebrating at her dacha, which is not far from the city. We'll go and it will be great if you don't want to dance. We can at least take a walk, The weather is great and there's a forest and a river nearby, maybe even sunbathe. Mironov, the one from KVN, Slavik asked with surprise. Katya looked at him and said, "Yes, and do you know him, Vyacheslav? You surprised me. I thought you had no idea what KVN is and what people do there." "I don't and I don't want to," the boy replied sullenly. "It's very important for me to be interested in such nonsense. I just hear this name every day from the girls in our group, and they all swoon over him. Mironov this, Mironov that, they discuss his new hairstyle, but I've seen his photo. He's just a regular guy with no intellect in his eyes to look at." "Well, you know better," Katya smiled and turned back to Nastya. "So, are we going?" The girl hesitated, unable to answer. Slavik warned her not to even think about it and suggested they go to the cinema. "They say a military drama has come out and it would be interesting to watch." "What are you going to do with those alcoholics at the dacha?" the boy asked with a contemptuous tone, which made Nastya look at him indignantly and say, "They're not alcoholics, they're perfectly normal guys. Igor is into hiking, he's climbed all the mountains in the Urals, Ilya is getting a second degree, studying day and night, and Mironov himself behaves decently around girls, he jokes without being inappropriate. You don't know anyone and you throw insults around. Is that even okay?" Vyacheslav immediately looked down and apologized. Okay, I was wrong, it's just that in my opinion, it's all frivolous time wasting, singing, dancing, and village grandmothers having fun in the club." Honestly, Katya narrowed her eyes slyly. "You've never been with us, have you? So here's my invitation, come to the dacha tomorrow, have some fun, meet the guys. Oh, and Volodya Aristov is also coming." Aristov, is he related to the dean?" the boy asked, interested. "No, he's his son. See, it's useful to go to parties, you can make good acquaintances and friendships for life." "You're right," Slavik nodded enthusiastically. "I think I'll go. So, tomorrow then, thank you for inviting me, girls. I'll go now, I need to finish my coursework so it doesn't weigh on my mind." The boy walked away. With a funny bouncing gait that always made Katya laugh, Nastya Sukrasnaya looked at her friend. "Why did you invite him? You said he's a bore, and with such a bore at parties, it's not fun." Katya winked at her. "Don't worry, we'll go to the country house and you can pretend you don't know him, but that wouldn't be nice." Nastya hesitated. "I'm afraid your friends will offend him. You said yourself that all the guys there are decent and good catchers. Who would offend him? If Mironov starts joking, poor Slavko will be in trouble. Anyway, they won't kill him there." Katya waved her hand. "Don't worry, besides, you can see that he's happy and can't wait for the dean's son to call him his best friend. Let's give him that opportunity." They arrived at the dacha in Paulina's car, one of their friends. The car was small and Slavik was the only guy in the group, annoying everyone by constantly complaining about the cramped space, the hot air and claustrophobia. "Listen, academician," Katya interrupted him sharply. "You should have walked then. You didn't understand the joke. You've gone crazy for 20 kilometers. You wanted to meet Volodya Aristov, so deal with it, you'll become a professor." Vyacheslav looked at Nastya sitting next to him and sighed heavily. "I came only for you," he whispered. The tense girl smiled. "Of course, Slavik, I understand." They arrived at the party as one of the first guests. When the guests started to arrive, Mironov came out to meet them and Nastya handed him her gift. "Here you go," the girl gave him a small box and smiled. "Congratulations on your birthday." I hope you like it. Thank you, the boy nodded, confident that a gift from such a beautiful girl couldn't be bad. The host stepped aside to greet other guests and Vyacheslav jealously asked what had just happened. Did Katya give him something? The tired Nastya rolled her eyes. Relax, Slavik, there were no gold or diamond trinkets. It was just a little trinket. Mironov collects them, everyone knows that. We bought one to make him happy. Nothing more to it, Nastya chuckled and sighed. And I thought. Her friend said with a smile, you'll see, it will be fun. The guests were slowly filling the house and the celebration was gaining momentum. They turned on the music and started dancing. Nastya took a glass of non-alcoholic cocktail and at first she enjoyed the general excitement. It distracted her from the gray weekdays and stirred her soul. The only unpleasant thing was Slavik. As Nastya feared, the guy relentlessly followed her and expressed his dissatisfaction with the party. What kind of celebration is this? He grumbled. It's just a bunch of laughter from all sides. There's no one to talk to and no aristocrats in sight. He probably doesn't even know about this party. Katerina tricked me. But then their glamorous friend appeared and said, No, there are plenty of aristocrats here. You just have to look more carefully. See those guys in the far corner? There are aristocrats among them. Go and make an impression on him. Vyacheslav looked suspiciously in that direction and asked, What are they doing there? They're competing to see who can drink more, she replied. So if you're a real man, show your courage. Go and knock Aristov off his feet. Slavik blushed and turned pale, but didn't move from his spot. Nastya tried to stop him, but he didn't listen anymore and said, Everything will be fine. You'll see, I'll beat them all. I have good genes. Katerina asked, What about the genes? When Slavik left. His grandfather was an alcoholic, Nastya replied with bitterness. That's why Slavik doesn't like alcohol and drinking games. Oh God, where did he go? We won't be able to get him back to the dormitory. Katerina tried to calm her down and said, Don't panic. If what you're saying is true about his grandfather, then Slavik must have a strong head. He'll make it back. I won't try to convince you to dance. If you want to find me, you'll find me. Nastya nodded absent-mindedly and her attention was drawn to the guys who had easily accepted Vyacheslav into their circle. He was stupidly grinning, muttering something and clearly trying to suck up to them, hoping to gain their attention. Nastya felt disgusted watching this scene. Did Slavik have no pride at all? What about his endless speeches about achieving everything with his mind and becoming an academic? Was it all just talk? He had one glass of wine, then another, and a third. The audience cheered him on while Slavik struggled to stand and bowed to those present, like an actor after a performance. Nastya tried to lead him outside for fresh air, but stopped herself. Hadn't he chosen this himself? She felt disappointed and the evening was getting late. Nastya wanted to be as far away from the crowd and the party as possible, even better if she could be in her own bed with her mother nearby. She wandered into the garden to calm down among the green landscape. But her peace was short-lived. Somewhere nearby, a twig snapped and a drunken voice said, Look who I found. What are you doing here, beauty? Everyone's inside having fun and you're all alone. Nastya barely held back a groan. Why did all of this have to happen to her? First, the foolish Slavik participating in a silly contest, and now this. She turned to leave, but the stranger grabbed her hand and said, Can't we talk for a bit? You're being rude. Nastya was truly scared now. In the dimming light, she couldn't make out the stranger's features, but he was big and bulky. "Let me go," she yelled and, miraculously, managed to break free. She hurried back to the house, with the stranger following close behind and calling out, "Let's talk, I won't hurt you." Nastya was about to scream, but didn't think anyone would hear her over the loud music. Then, someone did. "Max, let her go. Why did you bring her here if you're going to act like this?" Nastya turned to see who had come to her rescue, someone she had never seen before. The first person who knew in the semi-darkness that reigned on the street was a girl who could only make out that the boy had light hair and fairly regular facial features. The stranger holding her hand laughed and asked, "Who are you, the commander or the educator?" "Go away before I hit you again," the blonde giant warned with a threatening tone. The healthy-looking blonde continued to laugh heartily, and then swung at the blonde, hitting him in the face. The laughter stopped abruptly, and the brute who had grabbed Nastya let go of his victim and sat on the ground, gasping for air. "Are you okay?" the blonde asked. "I think so," Nastya replied, her voice trembling. "I'm happy," she added, looking at him. "Yes, I can tell," the guy said. "You stutter a little, but otherwise, you seem fine." "Let me take you home," he suggested. "You can drink something to calm down." "No, I don't want to go to your house," Nastya shook her head. She remembered Slavik and Katya, who had started this whole mess, and suddenly realized that she didn't want to see any of them. "Where do you want to go?" the blonde asked. "Home," Nastya whispered, and unexpectedly burst into tears. "What happened?" The blonde was surprised. "Did Max hurt you?" "No," Nastya muttered. "I'm just having a really bad day. Everything is falling apart." "I understand," the guy nodded. "I have days like that too. So, let's get out of here." "Are you tired of being here too?" the girl asked. "Yes," the blonde nodded. "Except for that bore, Max, and Miranov's contemporary, there are only a few people here that I don't know. So, there's no point in staying." "Then let's go," Nastya smiled shyly. The blonde took her to the outskirts of a prosperous village where many visitors had left their cars. The guy's car made an impression on Nastya, who didn't know much about cars, but it was clear that it was a foreign car and not cheap. "I feel awkward getting into this car," she said modestly. "It's okay," the guy reassured her. "Even Max drove it. Although, after what he did today, he won't be getting any more rides from me." "Is he your friend?" Nastya asked. The blonde shook his head. "If it were Sasha's friend who asked me to take Max with me, saying he was depressed and needed to be entertained, I might have done it. But he's a handful. I spent the whole evening running after him, like a nanny, dragging him away from bottles and girls. When I get home, Sasha will hear about it." Nastya laughed and extended her hand. "Thank you for coming to my aid. My name is Nastya. What's yours?" "Nikita," he replied, shaking her hand. "Sorry I didn't introduce myself earlier." They drove onto the highway, and the girl bit her tongue for a moment, losing her voice, but then she regained her composure and squeaked, "Where are we going so fast?" "What do you mean, too fast?" Nikita asked, surprised. "The trees on the side of the road are a blur. Please slow down. It's very scary." Nikita slowed down to 100 kilometers per hour, apologizing. "I'm sorry. I thought I always drive like this. It's a habit." "What about you? Are you one of those daredevils?" the girl asked. The guy smiled. I don't like living quietly. I'm always in a rush. You have to seize every moment, otherwise life will pass you by without you even noticing. In my opinion, if you drive like you do, life might end even faster, Nastya admitted. It's very dangerous. But life is dangerous in general, Nikita winked. No matter what you choose, you'll end up dying anyway. So why be afraid of death and think about it before it's time? You're a philosopher, the girl noticed, but let's talk about something more cheerful. You know, it's dark outside, and after what happened, talking about death doesn't warm my heart. Agreed, the guy said, so tell me about yourself. Who are you, where are you from, and how did you end up at this party? They talked about various things on the way, and Nastya was charmed by Nikita. She had never had such an easy and simple conversation with anyone before. Slavik never agreed with her, on the contrary, he always argued and tried to prove his point. Katya called all these elevated discussions nonsense. Unexpectedly, Nastya found a person to talk to at this party, someone with whom it was easy to converse without choosing words or convenient topics. She couldn't sleep all night, replaying every phrase they said to each other in her head. In the morning, Katya burst into her room. Look at her, she's sleeping every day, she said. I've been calling her phone all night, worried sick, and she's sleeping. Do you know that Slavik and I called all the hospitals and morgues? The guys were looking for you in the forest all night. If you want to know, he sobered up immediately when he found out you were missing. And when he saw a drunk guy harassing me from his window, he turned away, Nastya said, hugging her knees. The girl remembered the events of the previous evening, and shuddered at the thought of what could have happened. If it weren't for Nikita, the drunk ambulance, it would have ended differently. Katya immediately lowered her tone and looked at her scared. You're scaring me. Tell me in detail what happened. I got tired of being in the house and wanted to breathe fresh air, Nastya said. I went out to the garden and decided to take a walk, and then some drunk guy approached me, grabbed my hand and tried to take me somewhere. I started screaming and he got scared. Katya was excited and continued to talk. That's not how it happened, Nastya smiled. He only stopped when another guy made him. Nikita came and saved me. I left for the city. Katya was surprised and whistled. I wonder if I know this Superman from which band he is. I don't know, Nastya shrugged. We didn't talk about school. It seems he's finishing university next year. That's all I know about him. What did you talk about then? Katya asked. I don't recognize you, Nastya. The Nastya I know would have asked about the guy's education and which subject he likes the most. I guess there's no more cramming, Nastya smiled. You never cease to amaze me, Katya. Katya smiled in response and began to tell the details of yesterday's party. When Vyacheslav found out that the girl had been found, he also wanted to meet her, but Nastya gave him the cold shoulder. I don't want to see you anymore or talk to you, she said resentfully. You put on this act with drinking, and then you laughed with your new friends when I needed your help more than ever. What do you call that? I don't know what you're talking about, Slavik said, surprised. Nastya realized that he didn't remember anything about what had happened. Maybe he didn't even see her in the darkness of the garden. But she couldn't back down. Her anger towards Slavik didn't subside. It's over between us, she said. Don't follow me around and try to teach me how to live. Yesterday, I saw that your lessons are worthless, and you don't even follow them yourself. So sorry, we're not friends anymore. I can't stand two-faced people, and Vyacheslav didn't even apologize to me. He almost cried. Nastya tried to forgive him, but every time she remembered the scene with laughing Slavic in the window, the traitor who left her in such a dangerous moment, she couldn't. Nastya and Nikita exchanged phone numbers, but the girl couldn't imagine that the guy would be the one for her. At least he will call soon. Nikita called her the next day and asked how she was doing after yesterday's attack by the tough guy Max, or after your ride, Nastya asked mischievously. After everything, Nikita laughed and said, "You're ready for new adventures. Be ready in 2 hours, we'll make a fighter out of you. We'll prepare you for any situation, maybe even teach you how to fight so you can stand up for yourself if there's another thug around. But first, we'll teach you speed." It seemed like you were going 200 kilometers per hour, as if you were on an American roller coaster. Maybe it's not that scary, Nastya laughed, but I agree. What will we start with? Young fighter course on bicycles? If you're a complete coward, then 23 kilometers per hour for starters will be just right. Where are you going? Katya asked curiously, watching her friend turn the wardrobe upside down in search of suitable clothes for cycling. We're going to the waterfront and renting a couple of bikes. From the looks of these two-wheeled monsters, they seemed more than they were in reality, and Nastya got goosebumps. Nikita gave her a brief briefing, which Nastya didn't remember a word of, and looked at her carefully. "You'll do fine," he said. "They say you can't forget how to ride if you've ever done it. Although if you remember how many times you've fallen due to your carelessness, it turned out that at the beginning, Nastya was riding pretty well and even gained speed, enjoying the warm wind. But then she lost her vigilance, and the girl fell on the asphalt." Worried Nikita threw his bike and ran up to her. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I scraped my knee a little, but it hardly hurts," the girl said. "You have a real battle wound here. Take my hand." "Let's go get treated," the boy said, his hand warm and reliable as he escorted her to the car. He apologized nonstop, and Nastya was embarrassed. "It's my fault. I was distracted by a funny pug that some girl was walking. I should have been paying attention to the road, but the idea of cycling was mine," she protested. "No, I should have invited you to a cafe for a date instead." How normal guys do it completely baffled Nastya. She was flattered that Nikita called their walk a date, but at the same time the girl didn't know how to behave. All her knowledge of dates boiled down to walks with Slavic, long and boring, during which her childhood friend spouted scientific facts. When they arrived at Nikita's house, Nastya's panic increased even more. "I won't go to your house," she muttered. "Why?" The guy was surprised. "Didn't we leave the promenade to take care of your wound?" "That's why." "But I thought we were going to the hospital." "We'll sit in line for 2 hours there. Plus, my house is closer," Nikita explained. "Don't worry, Aunt Tanya knows about bruises better than any doctor. You'll be in good hands." Nastya wasn't familiar with Aunt Tanya, whom Nikita mentioned. And that wasn't what worried her the most. The girl remembered the numerous warnings that Boyka Katya had bombarded her with. Don't believe the first person you meet, don't go anywhere with him, and God forbid you cross the threshold of his house. Nastya broke all these rules one by one and ended up not in an ordinary house, but in a real 3-story mansion, Nikita's residence. It looked like a castle, but the girl didn't feel like a princess stepping inside. She felt like Cinderella, and she clearly didn't belong here. "Aunt Tanya, can we have a moment?" Nikita called out as soon as they entered the hall. "We need you now more than ever." Footsteps were heard on the stairs, and a thin, elderly woman descended to the first floor. Seeing Nastya, she smiled warmly. We have guests today. What a surprise! Aunt Tanya, this is not a guest, but a patient, Nikita corrected her. Look at the knee. The woman noticed the hole in Nastya's pants caused by the swelling. We need to treat the wound right now. Let's go to the kitchen. The girl followed the mysterious Aunt Tanya. My name is Nastya. And you're Nikita's aunt? She asked. Tatiana Petrovna. You can call me Aunt Tanya. Actually, I'm the housekeeper here and have been working here for 20 years. I've known Nikita and his brother Sasha since childhood. Thus, for everyone, she became an aunt. She treated the girl's wound with iodine and applied a neat bandage. Then she smiled. That's it. You can start running again. Nikita and I didn't run. But Katya fixed my bike, Nastya sighed. He probably won't invite me anywhere now. I disappointed him so much. Tatiana Petrovna shook her head. That can't be. Believe me, I know Nikita. He wouldn't have brought you here if he didn't want to. And as always, he exceeded the speed limit, but he's alive, Nastya shouted. I'm so sorry, Nastya, but no, muttered Tatiana Petrovna. At that speed, cars don't survive. From the driver's side, Nikita was crushed and died on the spot. He didn't even suffer. Nastya dropped her phone from her weak fingers, swayed, and sat on a bench. A ringing sound came from the office. Katya rushed to her, but Nastya shook her head. You're going to make things worse for Pavel Ivanovich. He'll think about you for the rest of the class. Katya noticed her friend's expression change. What happened? What did Nikita say to you? It wasn't Nikita, Nastya muttered. How could it not be him? Katya asked. Do you think I didn't memorize the melody you set for his number by heart? Tell me what happened. Nikita died, Nastya said, feeling tears well up in her eyes. He called, but it wasn't Nikita. Aunt Tanya told me that he's gone. Do you understand, Katya? The whole story was just terrible. Nastya couldn't imagine how to live on. But even worse was that she couldn't even say goodbye to her boyfriend like a human being. Nobody except Tatiana Petrovna knew that they were dating. Nastya didn't dare to attend the funeral, but she found out from Tatiana Petrovna where and when they would bury Nikita. She came to the cemetery at the appointed time and watched everything from afar. Life lost all meaning for the girl. She didn't know how to go on. A few months later, she realized that she was pregnant. Wow, what a gift for the new year, Katya muttered when she heard the news. And what are you going to do? Just give birth, Nastya replied. Give birth, exclaimed Katya. Alone, without a husband? Yes, Nastya nodded. Nikita was brave. He wasn't afraid of speed or heights. I have to be worthy of him. Climbing a mountain is 1,000 times easier than giving birth and raising a child. You found adventures for yourself. Worst of all was explaining it to her mother. Vera Alexandrovna didn't try to dissuade her daughter from her decision, but it was clear that she was deeply disappointed in Nastya. She expected her daughter to go to the city and achieve great heights, but she turned out to be a single mother. What kind of family curse is this? Vera Alexandrovna shook her head. And for what? Following in my footsteps? Nastya didn't consider her future child a disaster. On the contrary, the girl was glad that she would have some memory of Nikita. A little later, Nastya found her guardian angel, or rather found him at the market when she went there in search of fresh fruit. "Nastya!" exclaimed Tatiana Petrovna, meeting the girl among the rows. "How are you? Oh my God, you're pregnant!" Nastya nodded, her voice shaking as she asked about Nikita. Tatiana Petrovna smiled. "I always loved only him," she said. "Oh my God," Tatiana Petrovna whispered again, and said nothing else. It seemed she had nothing left to say. She invited the girl to her home to have tea and talk. Nastya willingly went with her. The girl needed someone to talk to who knew Nikita as well as she did. Tatiana Petrovna came to his home when he was only 3 years old and treated Nikita like her own son. He was a prankster, she remembered, stirring her tea with a spoon. He ran around the house playing airplane or soldier. Sasha was calmer, always with his nose in a book when he wasn't playing with his brother. Nikita was lively but still a good, kind boy. If he broke something, he would help me clean it up. The maid and aunt would kiss him on the cheek in the morning like he was their own. "Now our home seems quiet," she said. "But everything has gone wrong somehow. Sergei Dmitrievich is always working and hardly talks to his son. Sasha has closed himself off. He's a scholar and hardly talks to anyone but his brother. They were different, but still loved each other." It's hard to say how long they sat there, lost in memories. Who cried more when the tears ran out? The tea had gone cold. Tatiana Petrovna asked Nastya how she was doing. "What are you going to do when you have the baby? You still have to finish school. You can't live in a dorm with a baby." "I don't know," muttered the girl. "I won't give up the baby, but what do I do next? I probably have to go back to my mother's village. I'll finish school later when the baby is older." "No, you can't put this off," the woman shook her head. "You think you have plenty of time, but then life gets in the way and there's no time for school. You'll have to wait until the baby goes to daycare. Then there will be school problems. You should move in with me. I have 3 rooms and I'm alone. My husband died and my children have moved away. We'll be happier together and we can take care of the baby together. How can I impose on you like that?" "It's uncomfortable," Nastya protested. "I'm a complete stranger to you and you don't owe me anything." "I'm doing this for Nikita," the woman replied. "Your future baby is like a grandchild to me. How can I let his life go off the rails if everything goes well for you? And don't refuse him either, Nastya. I beg you, it's very important to me." So they started living together. At first, it seemed strange to Nastya to live with a stranger. But soon she got used to Tatiana Petrovna and also began to consider her as her own aunt. Aunt Tanya treated her like her own mother, and by the time the baby was born they had already become inseparable. Nastya named her son Andrei in honor of her grandfather who took care of her when she was very young. Tatiana Petrovna happily took on the role of nanny, and although she taught the girl how to swaddle and feed the baby with a bottle, she preferred to do everything herself. "He looks so much like Nikita, he will be a copy. I just hope I live long enough to see what he becomes," Nastya said. She transferred to distance learning and soon got a job as a secretary in a small company nearby. However, soon this job disappointed her. They paid little and the boss nitpicked about everything. Nastya lost sleep and peace and began to drink tranquilizers more and more often. "Leave that job decisively," Tatiana Petrovna ordered her, watching her struggles. "I earn well, and I even have a pension. Don't I love you?" "No, Aunt Tanya," the girl shook her head. "I won't sit on your neck, and then I still have to pay for my education and buy something for Andryushka. What will you pay for everything? If anyone needs to leave their job, it's you. You yourselves complain that it's becoming difficult, your back hurts and your legs are not what they used to be. So quit and stay at home to take care of Andryushka. He loves you so much. Tatyana Petrovna thought for a moment and nodded. And that's not a bad idea. My legs really aren't what they used to be, she said. But I don't want to lose such a good salary. Sergei Dmitrievich always paid well and even gave bonuses for holidays. And he's a good boss. He won't swear over trivial things. And what do you suggest? Nastya didn't understand. Get a job in my place, Aunt Tanya said. I'll tell him everything as it is, that it's hard for me to work and I can't handle it anymore. And you, my niece from the village, are a good girl looking for work. We've become like family with Sergei Dmitrievich over the years. He's like a son to me, and I've replaced his mother. He'll listen, and you'll get a job in the household. The people there are good, and the cook, Lydia, and the gardener are very nice. Just don't talk too much with Vika, my partner. She's a nosy person. Just pretend you're busy with work and everything will be fine. Nastya was scared of this proposal, not because she was afraid of working in the village. The girl was used to everything. But to be close to Nikita's relatives was scary. What if they found out something, or if Sasha recognized her? They had, after all, been dating once. How would it look from her perspective, the former girlfriend of Nikita sneaking into his family's home to ingratiate herself with them and force her little son on them? And maybe even claim inheritance, because according to the law, Andryushka is the biological son of Nikita. Tatyana Petrovna waved her hand at all this nonsense when the girl shared her concerns with her. Anyone who looks at you will understand that you are essentially a pure angel, but that's too much, the girl said honestly. What will Sergei Dmitrievich think when he finds out that somewhere in the world his grandson is growing up? Nastya shook her head. I understand that, but I'm not ready to come and say, hello, I'm your failed fiancé. And what will Sergei Dmitrievich think? He'll probably think I came for money and thought of marrying a rich guy to get into a good family. Maybe someday. It's up to you, Aunt Tanya sighed, but think about work. It's a good place. It's a shame to miss it. You'll get an education and find something else. And for now, it would be nice to earn some money for your son. Nastya thought for 2 weeks until her boss's nitpicking became unbearable. Then she finally decided. I've thought about your offer and want to try, she told Tatyana Petrovna. Anyway, someday I'll have to get to know Nikita's family better. Maybe if they're really good people, I'll introduce them to Andryushka later. I've been waiting for this for a long time, said Tatyana Petrovna, satisfied. So, tomorrow I'll go with Sergei Dmitrievich, and on Monday, maybe I'll take you to meet them. And don't be afraid. Sergei Dmitrievich may look tough, but he's actually a good person. Everything turned out exactly as the woman had planned. Sergei Dmitrievich was, of course, disappointed to learn that Aunt Tanya, who had worked in their house for many years, had decided to quit, but he didn't argue. Okay, bring your niece, he sighed. If you vouch for her, then she must be a good girl. Nastya was terribly afraid of this meeting, but it didn't go at all as she expected. Sergei Dmitrievich barely greeted her. They signed some papers, and Tatyana Petrovna took the girl to get acquainted with the house. The bedrooms were on the second floor, the master's office, guest room. On the first floor, there was a kitchen, dining room, living room. Oh, hi, Vika. Meet Nastya, my niece. She's starting work tomorrow, Tatyana Petrovna said. For some reason, Nastya expected Vika to be a middle-aged woman like Tatyana Petrovna, but her partner was practically her own age. A pretty blonde with blue eyes and a slightly arrogant look from above. She nodded and said, "So we'll work together." She didn't show any particular joy at the appearance of her new partner, but smiled. "Nastya, I hope we'll become friends." Victoria looked at her with deep doubt and went about her business, carrying herself so ceremoniously that it was like a festive cake. Nastya looked at Aunt Tanya and noticed that she was unfriendly. "I warned you," the woman sighed. "It'll be fine, just be careful because of love." Victoria looked at Sasha. "I've been watching her and I've noticed it, so be careful." "What do I need to be careful about?" Nastya didn't understand. "Sasha isn't interested in me. Let them do what they want. Whether he's needed or not, we know about it." "Only you and I know about it," Tatiana Petrovna replied. "Victoria doesn't know. You know how jealous girls can be. If she thinks you also have eyes for Sasha, it will start. So it's better not to get too close to him. It's better to honestly do your job and not worry about it," Nastya reassured her. "You know that besides Andryushka, I don't need anyone. I don't even look at Sasha." Nastya kept her word and immersed herself in her work. At first, Nastya was afraid of being exposed, but time went by and nothing terrible happened. Sergei Dmitrievich was not himself and hid from work behind his papers, trying to forget his sorrowful losses. Sasha spent more and more time at the institute where he taught and studied in graduate school. He rarely came home, but when he was nearby, Victoria was also there. "What's new at the institute?" she asked with a smile. "How's your dissertation coming along?" Sasha replied vaguely, and Nastya, who was sometimes present during these conversations, hid her smile. Victoria didn't finish her studies at the institute and didn't go to college herself. It was beneath her dignity. However, she sprinkled her conversation with intelligent expressions, sometimes not even understanding their meaning. "I also want to become a professor," she said dreamily. "Or at least a kindergarten teacher. I've always loved teaching children, preferably with tenderness. Why resort to force? Students with whom I conduct laboratory work are no longer children." Alexander smiled. "And you can't get by with just tenderness. I can't imagine how I would be petting a giant on the head who's taller than me." Nastya couldn't help but laugh at the image. Sasha also smiled. Victoria turned pale with anger, shifting her gaze from one to the other. "I just wanted to say that rudeness isn't the way to go. You have to teach with your heart." When Sasha left the living room to work in his own room, Victoria pounced on Nastya. "You, idiot, decided to make me look like a fool in front of Sasha by laughing at me." Nastya shook her head. "Of course not, Vika. What are you thinking?" "I just imagined Alexander petting some thug's head and couldn't help but laugh. I can't imagine him as a kind nanny." "You're lying," Vika replied harshly. "I can see it in your eyes. You're the one who's always getting in my way with your laughter." Since then, Vika had grown to dislike Nastya even more, constantly making fun of her and even giving her icy silence. By that time, Nastya had been working in the house for several years and should have gotten used to Vika's nasty character, but the situation still upset her. And then Aunt Tanya fell ill, caught bronchitis in the rain, and had no way of looking after Andryushka. Nastya knew that the idea of bringing her son to work would end in disaster, and after listening to Vika's conversation with Sergei Dmitrievich and seeing that the storm had temporarily passed, she returned to the kitchen. To her surprise, she found Alexander there, leaning over Andryushka's album and drawing with enthusiasm. "Mom, we're drawing!" exclaimed the boy. It's been 100 years since I've done this, Sasha admitted. I tried it now and it turned out to be very exciting. It's not for nothing that psychologists recommend art therapy. That's very beautiful, Nastya said, looking at the drawing. And who drew what? Andryushka pointed to the crooked bear. That's me, and the bunny was drawn by Uncle Sasha. Nastya flinched at the address, but the man smiled. I always drew like a chicken with its foot. You probably wouldn't even be able to tell whose drawing is whose. The etiquette rules required Nastya to politely lie and say that Alexander was the best artist in the world, but she smiled instead. Well, you certainly can't be compared to Ivasovsky, but that's for the best. I can't stand academic painting. Vika looked into the kitchen, but seeing Alexander next to her partner, she glared angrily and stormed off. Don't pay attention to her, Sasha said. She's just not in the mood today. Nastya also felt disheartened at the thought of Vika. How much longer would they continue to fight like cats and dogs? Alexander looked at his watch. Well, it's time for me to run too. I have an important presentation today with a bunch of professors. My future depends on it. Good luck, Nastya nodded sincerely. She liked Sasha and thought that under different circumstances, they could have been friends. Alexander reminded her of Slavik, another scientist, but a more delicate and intelligent person. Nastya couldn't imagine a situation where Sasha would start drinking on a bet. The house was quiet and peaceful for a while as Nastya vacuumed the living room. Vika was nowhere to be seen, but she could hear her raging somewhere on the upper floors. Then the phone rang in the kitchen. Mom, the phone's ringing, Andryushka shouted. I hear you, my dear, but please don't forget that we're playing hide and seek here, Nastya replied as she took the phone. The caller was Sasha, who wasted no time in chatting on the phone. Thank God you're here. Something terrible has happened. My laptop died, and I urgently need a replacement, or I'll forget about my presentation. Aren't there any other laptops at the institute? Nastya asked. My arrogance let me down. Alexander made an elaborate presentation that weighs more than all the other documents on the flash drive combined. The old laptops here can't handle it. What can I do? If it's not too much trouble, could you take the laptop from my brother's room and bring it here? My performance is in half an hour. Take a taxi, it'll be faster. I'll pay for the ride, but I can't go. My job is in jeopardy, the girl muttered. What will Sergei Dmitrievich say when he finds out that I left without asking with my father? I'll talk to him, and he'll understand. Nastya, please help me. I'm begging you, Sasha said. Okay, the girl replied and hung up. Then she looked at Andryushka and said, I need to leave for a while. Will you wait for me here, my child? The boy nodded seriously. Thank you, my dear. And remember what we talked about. Sit quietly, don't scream or run, and don't even approach Aunt Vika. Play hide and seek, okay? Andryushka nodded again. Okay, Mom, he said. When Nastya entered Nikita's room, she felt a shiver run down her spine. She rarely cleaned there, but it didn't need to be rearranged, just not to water the flowers. Nevertheless, every time she was on the threshold, Nastya felt like the owner of the room was alive and would appear from behind the corner and smile at her. The laptop was on the table, waiting in vain for its owner to return. Nastya grabbed it, held it to her chest, and then rushed out onto the street. All the way to the institute, she mentally urged the taxi driver to hurry and asked the organizers of the presentation to wait a little longer. Sasha was waiting for her outside. "I owe you one." "Thank you," he said gratefully. "Thank you." Nastya watched him go and got back into the taxi. Her workday was over and she had to pick up Andryushka and go home. The next day started strangely. Tatyana Petrovna still felt bad, and Nastya had to take Andryushka to work with her again. Vika, who met her in the kitchen, smiled mysteriously. "You appeared," she said significantly. Nastya didn't understand what that meant and silently walked past her. Next was Alexander, who also looked into the kitchen for something and stopped. As if seeing the girl for the first time, he froze. "Hello," Nastya smiled. "How was the report?" The boy nodded approvingly. "Thanks again for your help." Contrary to his usual habit, he didn't stay to chat with her. There was some kind of amazement or shock frozen on Sasha's face. Nastya didn't know how to describe that feeling. During lunch, she was called to Sergei Dmitryev's office with his son, added Vika with a malicious smile. Nastya walked into the office and hugged her son. Vika stood next to her. Sergei Dmitriev looked at her, not sternly, but tiredly, and asked, "Do you want to tell me anything?" Nastya shook her head as if to say no. "Is it about you bringing a child into my house?" the man said without even looking at Andryushka. "No, not really," the girl replied. "I heard some new rumors about you every day. Very interesting, I must say. I told Sergei Dmitriev that you took the laptop from Nikita's room," Vika said happily and ran out of the house with him. "Can you explain what this means?" Nastya was ready to laugh with relief. But Alexander beat her to it. "I'll explain," he said. He walked into his father's office and stood next to Nastya. He looked seriously at Sergei Dmitriev and said, "Dad, this girl used to be Nikita's fiancée, and her son is your grandson. If you don't believe me, look at the boy. He looks like my brother and your son." Vika had a shocked look on her face as if she had been drenched in water. Nastya looked at Sasha in amazement and whispered, "How did you find out?" "From the laptop," Alexander replied. "Or rather, from the photos I found on it. There was a huge archive. I was digging through it yesterday after I read the report. I wanted to calm my nerves, but instead, I got even more shocked. You were the girl with the broken knee. And how did I not recognize you immediately?" They looked at Sergei Dmitriev, waiting for him to say something. Tears slowly rolled down his cheeks. "It's all true," he whispered. Little Nikita's childhood ended well. Vika quit on the same day and didn't want to stay in a house where everyone, as she said, was against her. Sergei Dmitriev didn't want to part with his grandson and kept asking Nastya about how she had been living all these years. Of course, the girl didn't stay as their housekeeper. In the beginning, she was a good friend to Sergei Dmitriev's family, who called her daughter. After a year, she married Alexander, and the young couple suited each other very well. They were serious and calm. A year later, Nastya gave birth to a daughter named Masha. Sometimes, she remembered her first love with warmth, but she continued to move forward because life, despite everything, flows smoothly forward. Many happy years await their family.